In today's video, we are going to talk about spastic muscles after a neurologic injury. In this video, you're going to learn what spasticity is, whether or not there's a cure for spasticity, and of course, based on your understanding that we're going to go over today of what spasticity is, interventions or treatments that you can do to minimize spasticity on your function or your overall movement. If you're new to this channel, I'm Tara. I'm a neurologic physical therapist, and on this channel we talk about anything and everything related to mobility, health, fitness, and mindset with the end goal of empowering you with as many tools as possible to take full ownership of your rehab and your overall health. So first, what is spasticity? Spasticity is a symptom that occurs due to damage to your brain or your spinal cord. Spasticity does not occur if you have not had damage to your brain or your spinal cord that is visible on imaging. That's number one, most important. And number two, spasticity and dystonia are not the same thing. So in today's video, we're specifically talking about spasticity, which is a symptom of damage to your brain or your spinal cord. So that's number one, most important. Number two, what is spasticity exactly? Well, spasticity is an involuntary contraction in a muscle that is what we call velocity dependent. So the faster you lengthen a muscle, the stronger that spastic contraction might be. Now, I've made tons of videos on this. We're not going to go into all the mechanisms as to why this happens or why some scientists theorize this happens. But for today's video and understanding what exercises might be the most valuable for you, the thing that you want to understand is that it is velocity dependent. Faster you lengthen the muscle, the more you're going to get that recoil reaction. What might this look like so that some of you who are experiencing your body doing strange things might help you to understand? Like if your arm falls fast, you might get this jerk up if it's spasticity in your bicep, which bends your elbow. Or maybe when you're walking, or maybe when you're in your car and you're on a bumpy road, you might feel that a little bit more. Or when you're standing on a leg with a spastic calf muscle. So what does the calf muscle do? It points the foot down. And so when you load the leg, what are you doing down here at the ankle? Is you're rapidly dorsiflexing that ankle. Okay, so that's rapid lengthening of a gastroc muscle. Rapid lengthening, what is it going to want to do? It's going to want to contract really quickly. Now, again, to help the exercises make sense today, the other thing to understand is spasticity and contractures are not the same thing. So spasticity is an involuntary contraction of a muscle. A contracture is when a muscle adaptively shortens and it gets stuck like that. So you cannot lengthen the muscle because it has adaptively shortened. Now, this is important because of when we go over the exercises today, but spasticity can turn into a contracture. So that's very important to understand. If your muscle is contracting all the time and it stays in this shortened position for prolonged periods of time, it will adaptively shorten and can turn into a contracture. So we want to prevent that from happening. So that is very, very important to understand when we get to the exercises today, is that you do not want your muscle to stay in this shortened position for prolonged periods because it will get stuck like that. So that's very important to understand. The other thing that's important to understand, and this comes up a lot in our webinars and in our monthly Q&As, is there a cure for spasticity, or will spasticity ever go away completely? And this is very, very nuanced, but generally speaking, based on my experience, if you have spasticity because you have damage to a brain region, a motor area of the brain, it's never going to go away completely. And there is no cure for spasticity. So I know some of you get Botox. That's great. It works in some cases, but all these treatments that you're getting, like with your doctor, or maybe you're taking baclofen, or maybe even some of you have a baclofen pump, all of those are just to minimize the impact that spasticity has on your overall movement. But I'm not going to give you a hopeless answer here. What I am going to say is that to our best guess or our best understanding as of right now, potentially in some cases, the more motor connection you get with that limb, that arm or that leg, potentially you're going to have less spasticity. So that's one thing to know, is that you can't cure spasticity, but there are exercises we're going to go over today that can significantly minimize the impact it has on overall function. And making a connection with that movement generated from your brain could potentially decrease that. The other thing we know just about muscles in general is that when you contract or you make a muscle on the opposite side of the joint contract, sometimes it will decrease or it'll relax the muscle on the other side. So what do I mean? This is a quadricep contraction. So if you straighten your leg out, the muscles on this side of the knee straighten that leg out. There is a mechanism where when you contract the muscles on the opposite side of the joint, the muscles on the other side have to relax. So we call this the agonist. We call these muscles the antagonist. Anytime you contract the muscle, the antagonist, the muscle on the opposite side of the joint, there is potential that the muscle on the other side of the joint relaxes a little bit. So why is that important for all of you? Is that one other thing that you could potentially do is use some modalities, whether that's electrical stimulation or what I prefer, electrical stimulation with exercise on the muscles on the opposite side of the joint. It might have some impact in minimizing the force of that contraction or lessen the severity of that spasticity for your overall function. Now, one thing that I think is really, really probably the most important to understand is, or to get clarity on, is that spasticity is never going to go away completely. The way it appears to me, just in my experience of working with people with spastic muscles, is that you can decrease the sound of the hum. So you can decrease the noise. So if a muscle contraction is a really loud noise, you can make that noise a little bit quieter. And for some of you that just have a little bit of spasticity, you can almost make it so quiet that you don't recognize it or you don't feel it interfering with your movement as much on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so you can turn the volume down on that contraction. And that comes from a combination of stretching and movement retraining and functional training. Okay, but why do I think it's important to tell you that it's never going to go away completely? Because I think what happens a lot of times, and again, this is just in my experience and the people that I see in person, is that you start to feel better and you feel like you can move better and you don't really notice the spasticity as much, and people stop doing their exercises. And then what happens, and why people usually end up coming to see me like years down the road, is because that noise or that spasticity starts to get loud again. So why is that so important? Is once you get into a good routine of the exercises we're going to go through today, I would consider these like a non-negotiable component of your daily home exercise program. Just think about it that way, and hopefully that was a good kind of analogy of the sound, is like you're decreasing the volume. When you stop doing the exercises, that volume's going to slowly increase again. So that's a hopeful response to those of you that are asking, will it ever go away completely? Probably not, but you can turn the volume down on it. The other reason this is important, and you guys know I talk about this quite a lot because I'm quite passionate about it, is coming out of your AFO too early or coming out of it and throwing it away. If you are someone where your therapist has said that you are ready to come out of that AFO, I would never throw it away, and I would not be opposed to having to put it back on occasionally when you start to feel that volume rising again. Maybe you go a couple of weeks wearing your AFO, again with what I call a plantar flexion stop. For those of you that don't know, AFO is ankle foot orthoses. It's the brace that goes, many of you have the plastic brace that goes on the lower part of your leg. That's an AFO. And what I like is a plantar flexion stop, so you can get one that has, it doesn't allow your foot to point. Keeping that in the closet and occasionally pulling it out when you start to feel that volume or feel that volume rise again. Probably not a great idea to use an analogy of something moving versus the sound of something, but anyway, so you want to keep that volume down. You don't want the spasticity interfering with your overall movement. What does that mean as far as the exercises? I kind of have broken this down into 3 categories. You do need a stretching component of a well-designed program. And a stretching component means you're holding your body in a way that that muscle stays lengthened for at least a minute. That's how you're going to prevent that adaptive shortening. But by having more flexibility in that muscle, you're also going to decrease your body's awareness of that quick stretch. So if you visualize it this way, very tight muscle or very tight elastic band, you're going to feel, your body's going to feel that rapid lengthening a lot earlier than if you have a lot of elasticity in that muscle. Your body is not going to feel, or your brain's not going to feel that lengthening as quick. And it might mean that you can get away with more movement without that involuntary contraction kicking in. So prolonged hold in a lengthened position, very, very important. Minimum of a minute. But if you guys have braces and tools that help to keep it in a lengthened state for longer periods of time, such as a night splint for your leg, highly recommend that. But minimum of a minute for the stretches, and we're going to go through the stretches that I think are the most important when we get to the muscles that are usually the most spastic. Then the second part of the program, you want something where you are kind of working on the speed of lengthening. Okay, so you want your body to be exposed to that time of the lengthening, like that rate of lengthening. Okay, the more you can get exposed to that and not let it go into that recoil reaction, potentially that's going to decrease the amount that your brain, or the intensity that that recoil reaction happens. So some component where you're doing a very rhythmic lengthening, just kind of exposing that muscle to that rate change or that speed change of that muscle lengthening. That's the second most important component. And then the third most important component, I think, if you can, is to do something where you're trying to activate the antagonist, something where you're trying to activate the muscle on the opposite side of the joint. So if we're talking about the hamstrings, that'd be something where you're working the hamstring, where you're working the quadriceps. For many of you, you have spasticity in your quads, so your leg is always staying straight this way. Something where you're working the antagonist, the hamstring, even if that's in active assisted, which we've done a ton of videos on that, but active assisted component where someone's actually helping you to bend that knee. Something though where you're trying to activate that. And then of course electrical stimulation does work if it is combined with a functional movement. I've talked about this quite a bit on the channel too, but E-stim, just putting electrical stim on a muscle, it does stimulate the brain, but it's not really stimulating the parts that are involved in like conscious voluntary movement. So how do you get that part involved? You have to consciously be trying to do the movement when the E-stim is contracting that muscle, in my opinion. So what does that look like for a spastic ankle? Something where you are working ankle dorsiflexion. And we'll go through a couple of exercises today for that, because I know what a lot of you are thinking is they don't work at all, but we're going to go through a couple of exercises for that as well. Okay, so just to review, spasticity doesn't go away completely. The exercises that we go through today are trying to turn the volume down on that involuntary contraction. We want to make sure that a program includes a component where you are decreasing the potential of that involuntary contraction turning into a contracture, which is adaptive shortening. And you want to make sure that you're including some sort of a rate, an activity that changes the speed of that contraction or lengthening, and something where you're activating the muscles on the opposite side of the joint, or what I called the antagonist. What muscles are we going to focus on today? Well, we're going to focus on the quadricep muscles, the muscles that straighten the leg, because those are pretty commonly involved in as far as a spastic muscle. And then the ankle plantar flexors, the muscle, the gastroc soleus and posterior tibialis are usually involved and cause that foot to point down. So hopefully that all of that made sense, but now let's go ahead and dive into the exercises. All right, so you guys have seen this exercise a million times, but we're gonna go through it again. So we're gonna start with the entire process or routine for the ankle, and then we'll get to the quads. But what you wanna do is use a wedge, toes up, push those hips forward. And again, you want to hold it for a minute. Can't stress enough how important this is. I know you guys have seen it a million times, but it is super important. Okay? And then, because there's different muscles down around the ankle and they all kind of need to be stretched, so you have to angle the wedge at different angles to hit all those muscles. The other one you want to do is have the wedge off at a 45-degree angle. Same thing. You want that pinky toe to feel like it's a little bit higher. And then again, you're going to push your hips forward. So wedge 45 degrees. And then again, same thing here. You're pushing that those hips forward. Okay? And then you also want to do that with the knee bent. So push those hips forward and then bend that knee and hold that for a minute as well. So that is the stretching component. That is the component I was talking about when it comes to just preventing a muscle contracture. You don't want to lose that elastic property of that calf muscle. Remember, it's involuntarily contracting a lot. So you want to do this regularly to prevent it from getting stuck in that shortened position. And then the other one that I really like is just forward, backward stepping. Okay, and you should do it at like different speeds. And again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to almost kind of rapidly lengthen that calf muscle to get it to adapt to that lengthening so that potentially it'll minimize that reactive contraction or recoiling. So you just want to forward, backward step, trying to keep your heel down. While you do that, the other one I like are just little squats. You can see all of these are kind of rapidly lengthening that muscle, okay? And then the crouch walking kind of does that too, where you just keep that knee bent and you just forward, backward step. Again, you want that muscle back there to get used to that rapid lengthening, okay? And then the final exercise is that third component I mentioned with contracting the muscle on the opposite side. So I know what a lot of you are thinking, I can't lift my foot up, those muscles just do not work. And that is true. So the other option is you start against a wall. This is your involved leg right here. Okay, so this is your involved leg. See, it's kind of in a pointed position right now. Put all your weight on this leg. This is your involved leg. Okay? And what you're going to try and do without pulling yourself forward is come off the wall. Do you see how that ankle is flexing, dorsiflexing? That is one way where you can work on trying to activate those muscles that bring that foot up. Okay, and it's where most of you are. If you're watching this video and you made it to this point, that means you do have a lot of spasticity, or at least you're interested in helping someone that has a lot of spasticity in the muscles that point the foot down. So you probably don't need to go beyond this. If you get a little bit of a contraction with E-stem, the electrical stimulation, work with your therapist, or I've made videos on it on this channel about where to put those pads to kind of activate those muscles on the front and do that and do them together. Okay, the hardest way to try and lift your foot up is in the air like this. That's going to be the hardest for most of you if you have this spasticity in your ankle. So I recommend planting the foot, and instead of moving the foot bone up, you're moving the shin bone forward. Okay, so if you have an angle, you can either move this vector or you can move this vector, right? We're just going to move the one, we're moving the shin bone, okay? Forward. That's the activation of the antagonist, the muscle on the opposite side, to try and minimize the potential of this muscle contracting. And so that is the routine for a spastic ankle. But now let's get into a same format for the quadriceps. All right, so exercise number 1 is just letting that foot fall. And holding it for about a minute. Remember, this is to stretch that quadricep muscle, prevent that adaptive shortening of these muscles right here. If you need to add an ankle weight to help bend that knee, add an ankle weight. And then the speed component of this one, remember, we want to get it to lengthen quickly. To get it used to that, getting it exposed to that, is letting it fall. Kicking it out, and then letting the foot fall. And then the next component is adding that weight and letting it fall rapidly. Kick it out and let it fall rapidly. Okay, kick and let it fall rapidly. And then the final one is activation of the antagonist, the muscle on the opposite side. And I like the same position. You're gonna let it fall and then try and pull it back a little bit more, okay? So you're gonna kind of use momentum, and then at the very end, when it starts to wanna come forward again, see if you can pull it back a little bit further. Okay, that's gravity assisted. Okay, so let it fall and then almost kind of use that gravity to your advantage. And then at the very end, try and pull it a little bit further before you let it swing back out. Let it fall, pull it back a little bit further before you let it go. Fall, pull it back a little bit further before you let it go. And then that is it for this video. I hope you guys really listened to the beginning. There's a ton more exercises that I could have shown, but if you understand the concept, then you will be able to kind of go through some of the other videos on this channel and kind of piecemeal some of the other exercises together, as long as you're hitting those 3 components. And just to review, prolonged stretching, something that has some kind of a speed component to it, and then something that activates the muscle on the opposite side of the joint. So again, hopefully you guys found this video helpful. If you did and you're new to this channel and you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so that you'll get notified every time I upload new videos. If you found this video helpful and you're in the process of recovering from a neurologic injury, you might be interested in our membership programs, where we go really in depth in a lot of these concepts and really just offer a lot of content in a lot of different ways to help you get the results that you want to get and go as far as you can after a neurologic injury. To learn more about our membership programs and to sign up, visit rehab-hq.com. I enjoyed spending time with you all today, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.